All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Matt Orangeback from DoiT International, and I've got a couple of great speakers here for you today. We're going to talk leave no leftovers. We're going to harvest, nice pun on Thanksgiving there for you, the full power of Google Kubernetes engines. Thanks everyone for joining. Really looking forward to the next 40 minutes we'll be spending with each other. Next slide, please, Kevin. To the agenda, right, we're going to get a brief introduction, meet me and the rest of the very smart people that I brought with me. Talk about, you are obviously very well aware of who Google is, maybe not so much DoiT or AMD. We're going to talk about the relationship and the partnership between the three of our organizations. And then, right, naturally what you are all here for, our engineering-led discussion with Yuval, Kubernetes and managed Kubernetes, an EKS versus GKE cook-off. Finally, we'll wrap up with how to optimize the cloud with AMD, and then we'll open up for a brief Q&A session at the end. So with that, let's introduce the speakers. So first of all, I brought with me Yuval, who's one of our senior staff cloud architects here at DoiT International. Myself, I run the Google Cloud practice for us here in the Southeast Mid-Atlantic. Brought with me Mike, our global sales manager from AMD, and Joni Ricard, our partner sales manager from Google Cloud. So with that, I'll go ahead and pass the baton to you, Joni, to kick us off.
Wonderful. Hi, everyone. My name is Joni Ricard. I'm a Google Cloud partner sales manager for our Southern California region. So every day I have the pleasure of working with companies like AMD, as well as some of Google Cloud's largest resellers and managed service providers like DoiT. So today I wanted to just walk through what makes GCP different and why you should leverage partners like DoiT and AMD to really scale your digital transformation efforts. So companies today do have a wealth of opportunities triggered by the desire to accelerate their business. So this is where the partnership with Google Cloud can really play a critical role in helping you reimagine your company and your business through data-powered innovation, allowing you to both scale and adapt to rapid changes in your industry. So again, in a nutshell, why Google Cloud? So here it first starts with the basic foundation of security. So security is pretty much at the core of everything we do. From workspace to cat videos, we manage data and we run critical infrastructures daily. And that really requires us to implement the most robust end-to-end security solutions, applying the maximum amount of security at the maximum number of points. So second, our intent is to offer customers the power of choice and flexibility in how you run your business. So we focus on the use case first and the technology second. So because of the way we think through things, we typically encourage a hybrid architecture that's designed with the main goal of quickly adapting as your organization evolves. So next, around automation, developers do choose Google Cloud because of our intuitive user experiences, tools, and a tight focus on automation. So this really allows your technical team to spend less time on manual development and tasks and more on deployment, innovation, and management. The next, around AI and ML, with some of our leading AI solutions portfolio, Google really helps businesses commit to business outcomes. So whether it's saving time, preventing fraud, we focus on becoming a strategic partner in innovation and not just a technology vendor. And then finally, we do have a culture of constant innovation and creativity. So we dedicate ourselves to becoming the cleanest cloud. We have a healthy culture of diversity and inclusion. And overall, having a customer-first mentality really allows us to become the best partner for our customers. So enough about Google, let's talk about why we work with a GCP partner. So next slide, thank you. So partnerships really allow Google and the partner to focus on what we each do best. So a question we often get asked is, why do we engage with resellers and partners? So first, for our highest priority customers and at no additional cost to these customers, Google has placed a big investment in our partner community, and this allows us to add and extend an extended layer of consultation, support, and service. So one important note here is that a partner is never a replacement for your direct relationship and support with Google. So the account team, the partner sales managers will continue being your direct line of support into Google. And again, we consider the partner to be a value add. So for DoiT specifically, the value add can come in the form of a TCO analysis, cost optimization, and other proprietary tools that that DoiT has developed. Next, we vet our partners pretty regularly to make sure that they deliver high quality work and support. So they have GCP certified resources on staff, and at the same time, they have highly experienced business and technical resources who can provide free consultation on digital transformation efforts as a whole. Next one, for offloading heavy lifting, this can come in form of better support response times, evaluating trade-offs for your workloads, as well as even navigating through more complex business or compliance issues. And lastly, as I can attest to, our Google contracting process is often more complex than our partners. So our partners can often provide more flexible terms and options that fit some of your business needs. So again, just to level set, as you think about your 2022 efforts, we have the right tools and partners to really help you launch. So to talk more about this, I'm going to hand it back to Matt from the DoiT team.
Awesome. Thanks, Joni. Appreciate that. You go ahead to the next slide, Kevin. Yeah, as Joni mentioned, right, Google is a technology company, and they have some of the best technology in the world. And they enable partners like us, and there's a couple others, to provide that extra layer of services and support. And one unique thing that we do it all at no cost. So with that, right, you've heard of Google Cloud, but you DoiT International, maybe not, and that's okay, right? We'd rather earn your trust by working with you rather than expect it from some sort of name recognition. But with that, we've been doing this for years. We got a couple thousand customers in about 70 different countries. We do have a global footprint. Right? I mentioned we've been doing this for about 10 years now. You know, we've got a $100 million investment by Charles Bank. So long story short, we've been doing this for a very long time and are not going anywhere. We do, next slide please, three things ultimately kind of very well. One, we provide unlimited strategic consulting to all clients of DoiT. We provide 24/7 by 365 sub 1 hour support. And yeah, as Joni mentioned, we do have some proprietary tooling. We have developed a cloud management platform to help better enable you all to leverage the power of technology that is Google Cloud. This next slide. So I mentioned unlimited strategic consulting, right? We 7 times partner of the year. We are, right, we're obviously, you know, experts in GCP, but also AWS and Microsoft as well, right? If we're going to migrate you from one workload to the other, or as Yuval's going to talk about here in a little bit, help spin up workloads in EKS versus GKE, we have to be experts in both. But with that, we're experts in not only in the infrastructure, but also in machine learning, leveraging data analytics, right? Migrating cloud, you know, machine learning. And as I mentioned at the beginning, we provide unlimited strategic consulting to all clients of DoiT at no additional cost. So next slide, we'll talk about our services. I mentioned the 24/7 by 365 support. Clouds are infallible and sometimes they go down, right? But on top of that, right, you have no doubt, you know, had your own experience with Google support. For us, right, I mentioned we have dozens and dozens of engineers. We do not have level 1 or level 2 engineers. Everyone here at DoiT is a senior level engineer with the average first reply time of right now 36 minutes. We provide, as I mentioned, 24/7 by 365 sub 1 hour response. And the last bit of this that I mentioned is the cloud management platform. Next slide, please. I mentioned we do 3 things really well, right? The third being the cloud management platform. And our mission here, right, with DoiT International is really to enable you all to do it yourself. So that we've delivered a platform that helps you really analyze and understand your cloud costs so you can better focus on your business and your customers, not on managing the cloud. Next couple of slides will show a kind of a brief overview, a sneak peek of this, right? The cloud management platform, like to see, is your all-in-one things for all things cloud, right? We provide historical costs and forecasts. We give you a real clean understanding of the breakdown in services. You can identify the costs by scope, by service, right? You can trend and forecast what your cloud bill is going to look like the next month, and so on. Next slide, please. One of the great key features, right, is the cloud reports. It gives you instant visibility into your cloud costs, and the big part of this is no configuration is required, right? So with this, it gives you the ability to really analyze your cloud spend and, quite frankly, identify optimization opportunities, right? Are you over provisioned? Are you under provisioned in places? Where can you save money without, affecting the stability of your business or your organization, right? On top of that, next slide, we also have we've developed some anomaly detection, right? We've all heard those horror stories of developers spinning up workloads Friday afternoon and kind of forgetting about them. You leave the bill on Monday morning and you get this $10,000 bill. We're the nosy neighbor that's going to let you know that your lights are still on and there's 8 cars in the driveway Saturday morning. So with that, we're not going to go in and turn these things off for you, but right, we have fine-tune alerts and we'll provide feedback and let you know that, hey, something seems out of the ordinary. You might want to turn these off. And the last part, if you're leveraging BigQuery, we have developed a really, go ahead, next slide, a really unique financial operations dashboard to really help you identify. BigQuery is a really great and powerful tool, but sometimes we've all written bad queries here. This allows you to kind of run and test the query before you actually figure out what it's going to be, and really help you write better queries and ultimately, at the end of the day, save more money. So with that, the last aspect of this, everything that I mentioned, comes to you again at absolutely no cost. And as Joni mentioned, everything that we do is completely additive. You do not lose access to Google by working through us. So with that, no cost, no commitment, no risk. And I've talked enough. The reason why you all are here is to have a great conversation with Yuval, one of our senior engineers, to help understand how we're going to leverage the power of Kubernetes. And with that, I'll pass the baton over to Yuval. Yuval, take it away.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Joni. I'll just share my screen. Okay, so I want to start by creating a cluster in the meantime, just because it takes a couple of minutes. So let me just show you how easy it is to create a cluster on Google. So I'm going to the cluster creation page. I'll go into, and then I need to pick if I want to go with standard or autopilot, and I'll be talking about that. I'll create an autopilot cluster. Now I can just click the create button now, but I want to change just 2 things. First of all, give it a name, and I want to create this cluster in Australia. And just to show that regions in Google is something really simple. I'll create it in Southeast, and then I already created a network for that. Okay, so this will take like maybe 3 to 5 minutes. So in the meantime, let's talk about Kubernetes. So first of all, containers. So containers, people think that are magical things, but it's just a process running on a computer, just like your Google Chrome process or your Outlook process or anything like that. The special thing about containers is that these processes are namespaced, so they don't see the whole. Like you can set up a process and tell it, I know that you're running in a machine that has 20 CPUs, but you only get 1. Or I know you have 16 gigs of RAM, but you only get 2 gigs of RAM, and you can only see this specific file system and not the whole file system that you have in the VM or computer you're running. So these are containers. And to manage containers, to manage processes on a single machine, that's pretty easy. You have things like systemd or any kind of service manager if you're in a Linux machine, that if the process goes down, you can set it up to go to have the machine, to have the Linux machine bring the process back up. And you can do all of that in a single machine. But what happens if you want to run multiple containers on multiple machines, so you have high availability? How do you manage all of that? So for that, we need something to orchestrate and manage all the containers. And I think the orchestrator that won the container orchestration wars is Kubernetes. And then why Kubernetes and why Google? So the whole namespacing of a process, it's a feature that was written into the Linux kernel by Google engineers. I don't remember the exact time, but many years ago. And Google is running and destroying billions of containers every day. So as such, Google created systems that are very good at creating containers and managing them. And the name of this system in Google is Borg. And Google engineers said, wow, that works really nice on our internal infrastructure, but how do we share the love and share it with other people? They thought about open sourcing Borg, but it was too tied up with Google infrastructure, so they decided to rewrite everything, and that's how Kubernetes came to be. And because Google had all the knowledge of actually adding the code to the Linux kernel that enabled containers and orchestrating containers, I think that's the main reason why Kubernetes became the de facto standard for orchestrating containers. Now, running Kubernetes, it's a pretty complicated beast. You have the part where you have the control plane that's running on a couple of VMs or machine, and you have other machines where you run your workload, your web browser, web servers or databases, and your workloads usually run in other VMs or machines. To connect a new VM into the control plane, to manage the work plane that has something like the etcd database where Kubernetes keeps the state of everything that's running into that. That's not an easy thing to do. And this is where all cloud providers came in with a managed Kubernetes control plane. The first one was GKE by Google, and then Amazon has EKS, Azure has AKS, and other clouds has their own solutions. That helps because you do not have to manage all the control plane, the etcd database, the upgrades of the VMs that run all of that. That's all managed by people in the cloud, like Google SREs. That's their job, and they know how to do that much better than anyone else. Still, when you use a managed Kubernetes solution, what you had to do is you still have to decide, so my workloads, where are they going to run? Do I need a 4 CPU machine and 20 gigs RAM machine? Do the machine needs a GPU attached or not? And you could create groups of machines, group of VMs, and then decide my workload is going to this group or to the other group. But that still meant that the user needed to manage all of that. So this is where Google came up with GKE Autopilot. And GKE Autopilot mode means that now Google manages not just the VMs where the control plane is running, but it also manages all the nodes where your workloads are going to run on. So in essence, all you have to think about is my configuration files, my Kubernetes configuration files, and that's it. And let me show you such a configuration file. So for example, this one is for a service, and that's a simple configuration file for creating a service inside of Kubernetes. Now, the thing that I want to show here is that let's say that you have an environment on AWS, but you want to test drive GKE. So most of the time, what the issue that people is having, because Kubernetes is so nice that it's just a bunch of YAML files that you can apply to any cluster, the gravity is mostly on the database. So what happens if you have a database in AWS and your application running on EKS, but you want to test drive GKE? So this is something that I want to show you how do you do that. So this is the current setup that I'm going to show. I created an RDS, a managed MySQL database inside of AWS. I created an EKS managed cluster in another VPC. The connection between them is through a transit gateway in Amazon. The transit gateway is also connected through VPN to another Google GKE cluster that I created. And I want to show how I can connect to the database from the Amazon Kubernetes cluster first, which is, of course, easy, and then from the Google side. So let's start with, let's see which cluster I'm connected to now. So I'm connected to the AWS one, and then I'm going to connect to a pod that's running on that cluster. So I'm going to execute into the BusyBox pod. And as you can see before, I already created an external service which points me to the database. So what I'm going to try is I'm going to just try to telnet into the service and see if I get any response. So I see it's asked me for the password. So now I just showed that, I just demonstrated that the connection between my pod running on the EKS cluster and my RDS, my database, is working. Now let's do the same for a Kubernetes cluster that's running on Google. So Google wants me to answer. So I'm going to use the Google one. So get out of this pod first. And I'll connect to my BusyBox running on the Google side. And I'll just try the same thing. So I'll telnet, the service name is the same, it's pointing to the same RDS. And I get a response, which means that now I have a connection from Google going all the way back to Amazon. Now, I want to show you like a couple of things that I needed to set up on the Amazon side. So first of all, let's look at the cluster that I had running before. So the cluster I created, the pods are coming from this specific range. And if I go to the AWS side, I see that I had to add a route for the RDS part, telling the database, if you see a packet coming from the Google side, send it to the transit gateway, which is connected through the VPN back to Google. And I also had to add a security group, which is kind of a firewall rule that allows the specific port coming from the Google location. Now, the reason that I needed to use transit gateway on the AWS side is that the networking at AWS is region-based, and if you want to connect different regions in a VPC, you'll have to peer them or use a transit gateway. In Google, networking is much nicer because a VPC includes is global. So this is why I created the other cluster, which is in Australia. And let's try to connect that cluster and see if we can get a connection going to RDS as well. So first of all, we got the cluster working. So we'll go back to the cluster and Australian cluster. And I want to connect to it. Okay, so now I'm connected to this cluster. I'm going to create the service and this EasyBox pod on this cluster. That will take a couple of seconds. So in the meantime, if you remember, I needed to add the range of the pods. So this cluster has a different range. So let's take the range for the cluster and go to AWS, and I'll edit the routes and then add another route for the pods that's going to the transit gateway. And save that, and also add a security group. And a rule. Sorry, I have the GoToWebinar dashboard in my way. And where is the MySQL Aurora? And I'm adding this as well, saving the rule. Okay, so now let's go back. And see if my pod is up. Yes. I'm going to connect to the pod as I did before. And now we have one cluster in Australia, one cluster in US West 1, and I picked US West 1 because this is a clean energy cluster on the Google side, both talking to an AWS RDS database that it's in the Oregon AWS zone. Yeah, so this is what I want to show, and I want to leave some time for Mike to talk about AMD. Go ahead, Mike.
Thank you very much. That was awesome. I actually haven't really seen that kind of detail. That was really great, Yuval. Thank you. That was awesome. So thank you everybody for joining. I'm Mike Brzezinski from AMD. You're probably, you've heard AMD a couple of times during this presentation so far. So where does AMD come in? Well, Yuval just kind of showed you how to bring up a Kubernetes cluster for an Autopilot-based GKE. And where AMD comes in is when you're managing your own kind of clusters. So if you go to the next slide. So AMD and Google Cloud offer different types of virtual machine types. As you've all mentioned, when you're managing your own, you actually get to select which VM type you want to bring up. So why is this important? Well, there's two really important things when you're looking at performance for GKE, which is the bring up speeds and the performance of those containers. The N2D, C2D, and T2D products, which I'll be talking about, really give you a boost in performance when compared to other Kubernetes-based products from other CSPs, as well as the competitive products over at Google Cloud from AMD. What this does is gives you a huge benefit in the performance aspect, but also a cost benefit. As Thomas was talking about from a DoiT perspective, um, we really focus on bringing the best performance at the best cost, both from an AMD and a DoiT perspective and from Google Cloud. And that's kind of why we're here today, is to kind of tie that storyline to all of you as customers. So N2D is a general purpose type of machine that's focused on different general purpose types of workloads that I'll go into. C2D is in current private preview. It is a new product of Google Cloud with AMD. It is for those HPC, compute optimized, EDA, AAA gaming types of workloads. And then T2D, based on Tau VMs, which is the kind of the buzz around the market right now of the industry leading price performance product, competing against AWS's Graviton, ARM-based M6G types of products. Not necessarily just competing against that, but offering industry-leading price performance compared to any type of offering that's offered by any other CSPs at this time. Next slide, please. So how does this kind of tie into GKE? So GKE, as I mentioned, when managed, you actually get to select your different VM types. T2D is available on day one as of the 15th of this month. T2D and N2D with Milan are generally available and are selectable products in various regions around the globe. To mention, GKE Autopilot is a managed product currently running on E2-based E2-based VMs, which for those of you that know kind of the nitty-gritties behind E2, it is kind of using cores around different regions on availability. So you're not selecting any kind of like Intel or AMD or anything like that. It's really selected for you. So when you're managing your own, you actually get to manage that close into the product and do some optimizations and performance benefits to your workloads to get those boosts in performance. What this also does is, of course, maximizes your ROI. Getting improved performance at a lower cost is the best of both worlds when we're looking at cloud. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, N2D is a general purpose product. It's focused on enterprise applications, databases, web serving, really those generic general purpose types of workloads. T2D is focused on scale out. It's focused on web serving as well. It's really great for digital focused customers like e-commerce, social media customers. It's also very good for financial services, really any vertical. It's just really, really great for that price performance story. And then C2D around compute optimized, as I mentioned, HPC and EDA. It's also media transcoding, and it's also great, again, for AAA gaming. Next slide, please. As mentioned, N2D, I said the word Milan. So N2D is the current N2D version is based on 3rd Gen EPYC, also codenamed Milan. Currently, or existing prior to Milan, it was based on 2nd Gen EPYC Rome. Moving from N2D 2nd Gen to 3rd Gen actually gives a 30% better performance at the same cost. Google Cloud actually offers these two products, though it's a generational difference, at the same cost. A lot of customers are currently on Rome and moving over to Milan to really see that huge boost in performance. What this product also does is offered at a 13% lower cost than the N1 and N2 products. It's also very competitive, if not beating other CSPs with their general purpose types of machines. So again, as Thomas mentioned, best performance at the best price. These N2D based products are really giving you that. The reason for that reducing cost is because Google Cloud with AMD offers the largest VM types, offering up to 224 vCPUs. And what this does is let you do more on the same amount of hardware. What this does, not only does it do that, but it also adds to the sustainability story. So as a consumer, you're actually using less hardware to do more in the cloud than you would be able to do on-prem or with any other CSP. Next slide, please. N2D also offers additional features, sole tenant, which lets you, own the entire machine and not have to worry about noisy neighbors or any kind of intrusions on your performance. As of recently, it offers 100 gigabits per second networking, which is really great for those latency types of customers. Offers 9 terabytes of local SSD for those memory hungry types of customers, and then also confidential VMs based on AMD SEV secure encrypted virtualization technology, which gives you end-to-end encryption. Currently, on non-confidential VM products, Google Cloud has encryption for networking, for data in flight, and for data at rest. But for data in processing, it is not encrypted. So these confidential VMs really give you a next level of security for your processing data. Next slide, please. And what confidential VMs, when you bring these things up, you really wonder, what's the lift? I'm encrypting all my data that's being processed. Does that really take a lot of effort? Do I have to do code changes like if with Intel SGX? But no, that's not the case for AMD SEV. It's actually a hardware-based encryption that is as simple as clicking a box when bringing up your VM types. Confidential VMs for GKE are currently in preview and hoping to be in general availability relatively soon. But you can test it out now in select regions and select that button when bringing up your GKE clusters to test out that security feature. Of course, when you're doing encryption, you wonder, what about performance? Well, with GKE confidential VMs, you actually really do not see a decline in your performance. The way that this hardware encryption is based is, again, hardware, so it's not really doing anything to your software, so you're able to keep that high performance benefit of AMD-based VMs on Google Cloud. Next. As mentioned, C2D, again, it is in private preview, but I just wanted to kind of mention some of the things that will be available with this product. You're able to run 112 vCPUs, which is much higher than the existing C2 product at Google Cloud. Again, you're able to have 3 terabytes of local SSD like C2, and it's also going to be offering 100 gigabits per second. So that increase in gigabits per second, that increase to 3.5 gigahertz for frequency gives you a big boost in performance in the HPC space and lets you do even more computing in a short amount of time. Next. And then into T2D. So as I mentioned, this is kind of the buzz in the market right now. Google Cloud has done a few announcements around T2D as a product announcement in June against M6G and other competitive products from Azure. And then as of recently, a third party called Phoronix did some testing of T2D versus M6G and showed some really, really great performance numbers of how AMD technology with Google Cloud is really able to show that boost in performance. From the announcement in June, it showed 42% better price performance than AWS M6G, 56% better absolute performance. Again, this is focused at scale-out workloads, but what this also offers is full x86 compatibility. For those of you that don't know what that means, so AMD and Intel-based processors are based on x86 architecture, and Graviton 2 is based on an ARM-based architecture. So this differs, and when you switch from one to the other, you actually have to do code changes, and there's differences that need to be done on the back end to kind of make it run at an optimized performance. What this lets you do is stay on that x86 architecture that if you're already running in the cloud or running on-prem or running anything, you're already running on x86 most likely. So by not having to make that switch over to ARM and still getting even better performance and price, this is really helpful for a lot of customers that are trying to get the best out of their cloud solutions. Next slide. This is just some of the things that some of the customer testimonials that were announced at the N2D Milan kickoff. One that I wanted to highlight specifically is Vimeo. They're a huge user of data transcoding and media transcoding, but what they're able to do is get a huge boost in performance from older generation products to this new N2D 3rd Gen Epic processor, as you can see in the order of 20%, but also reducing their costs. So again, this is a huge customer that was able to see that performance benefit and that price benefit by using an AMD Google Cloud product. Next slide. And then finally, around the T2D product, these are just two very high-level customers that have tested out T2D. One that's not on here is actually DoiT themselves. DoiT, as the premier partner at Google Cloud and the #1 MSP globally, were able to actually get early access to this product. And they did a quote and announcement at the T2D product launch in June that they saw some huge benefits to Google Cloud and AMD working together to bring out this product. And they're very excited about offering it to their customers. That's kind of the end of the products themselves, but just to kind of highlight, the relationship that AMD has with DoiT and Google Cloud is really superior. DoiT and AMD's value props are very similar. We like to bring out the best and innovative products to customers, and that is really that Google Cloud product based on AMD. So I really appreciate the time and thank you. Back to you, Kevin.
Thank you, Mike. Let me just get to this. So now I'd like to open it up for a few questions. I see just a couple already in the chat. If anyone in the audience has any that they would like to ask, you can ask them in the question section on the GoToWebinar control panel, or you can simply take yourself off mute and ask it to the audience. But to kick us off, I have a couple that have come through. I think these would go to you, Yuval. The first question we have is, how would I connect to AWS services securely from GKE?
Yeah, so there's a blog post on the DoiT blog from one of our cloud staff engineers that wrote something called GToken. It's an open source tool where you can use, well, we actually use the STS, the token service on the AWS side, and the OpenID connection that you can create on the AWS side, and you can use a Google service account from the pod on GKE using workload identity, and that service account connects to AWS and gets a token, for example, to call, but it's not for RDS, but because that's just a simple connection, a database connection, but it could be DynamoDB, for example. So you can call DynamoDB from a pod running on GCP without having a secret key and ID inside the pod. So it's a once again open source tool from DoiT that you can use inside of your GKE cluster.
Okay. And I see one more question around Autopilot. The question is, can you run GPU workloads from Autopilot?
Okay, so currently Autopilot is only using the E-type machines, which means if you need GPUs or if you need local SSDs, you cannot use them on GKE Autopilot, and you'll need to use the GKE standard. I can say that on GKE standard, you can even use the N2Ds. You can use an M1 machine with the latest NVIDIA cards. But GKE Autopilot, because Google manages the nodes for you, there are a couple of things that are still not available. But new things are happening all the time. For example, you weren't able to use webhooks in Autopilot in the initial version of Autopilot, and now you can. So I think things like GPUs and other machine types will probably come in the future.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Yuval. Thanks, Mike, for taking the time to put this together, and thank you everyone who showed up. We covered a lot of stuff today. So if there was one thing or more that you found valuable, that you would like some more information on, or have a couple more questions, as Kevin mentioned, please reach out to us for help. We will happily have a conversation with you how to best leverage the great technology that is GKE. So with that, 7 minutes left. Thanks everyone for joining. Have a happy Tuesday. Enjoy the rest of your week.